Our first keynote speaker is a professor at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, where he's heading the Computer Vision and Learning Research Group. But more importantly to our topic, he is the intellectual trailblazer of Stable Diffusion, which, as many of you know, is the one of the most commonly used text-to-image generators used today. In his keynote, he will discuss the question whether AI constitutes a brave new world. We're very happy to have you on stage today, Professor. Please welcome, make a lot of human noise for Björn Ommer.
Thank you. The times they're changing, as Bob Dylan so famously texted, and they're changing fast these days in AI, in generative AI. This cursor here can change the world if you combine it with big data and machine learning. You can turn it into your personal interface to the digital world out there that allows you to essentially find anything that has been created beforehand. But the problem here is you can only find things that already exist, that have already been created. Just imagine how much greater the potential of this little cursor here would be if you would not just be able to find things that have already been created, but if you could simply, by describing what you want, speak things into existence. If you could describe images or videos, and without any technical abilities, without any special abilities or particular hardware, you could just speak them into existence and create them just by means of your words. Then you would turn this cursor, the computer, into this, a personal interface where you can describe what you want to see, and then just by the press of a button, you get images. You can take image material and modify that image material, or you take video and then edit things in the video, and then just by a click of the mouse, get the data created. Now, all that you've just seen are examples of Stable Diffusion, a tool that we created 1.5 years ago or so here in Munich. A tool that allows you to simply say what you want to see, a sunset over a mountain range, oil on canvas, or you say, no, that should be a vector graphic, and you get exactly that. You can take images and have the computer add material, hallucinate what's behind this tree there. You can do the CSI thing and take a small image and have the computer render that much larger than what it used to be. Or you can take rather sketchy renderings, probably more like my artistic skills here, and turn that into something which is more appealing. All that you've seen here has been powered by generative AI. And generative AI, I was asked to say a few words how training works of Stable Diffusion. You take this image that you see here on your left, and you add a tiny bit of noise. So little noise that you and I would not notice the difference. But when you repeat this process of adding noise there hundreds or thousands of times, the end result will look like you plug the antenna cable from your TV. Just pure noise at the end of the day, nothing left. Now, why are we removing the content from an image? We do that to turn that process around and to train an AI, a neural network, to take a noisy image and make it a tiny bit less noisy, remove a tiny bit of noise. Now, I guess we can all imagine an AI should be able to do actually that, get a tiny bit of noise out. But the magic happens when you repeat this denoising process hundreds or thousands of times. Then you start with a pure noise on your right-hand side, and you get not exactly what you have on your left-hand side, but something which is qualitatively similar to this dog that you have there. And with that, you learn a representation of our visual world out there. Now, a lot of approaches out there, especially by big tech companies, are going in that direction. And what we observed is, and what we were wondering is, how we can actually democratize the AI algorithms behind that. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is that our artificial intelligence uses actually most of the model to store things that you and I would not care about. How each individual hair on the fur of this dog is actually pointing. We just care about hair being there, what the average color, so to speak, is, what the texture is, the rough length that we have, but you don't care how each individual hair looks. We care about that being a dog and that not being a cat. So we were wondering, how can we actually make these models more powerful? The only way so far was essentially to make the artificial brain larger, and create models that got larger and larger and larger. And with that, evidently, these models were bound to just be run on hardware of a few big tech companies. And we were wondering, how can we make smaller models that ideally fit in consumer hardware more powerful? How can we, rather than making this entire brain larger, essentially make this pie, this green pie that you have that we actually care about as human beings, how can we make that larger? And that's essentially stable diffusion. If you want to build a model that can synthesize arbitrary images out there, you need to feed it a lot of training data, potentially billions of training images. But our goal was right from the bat to make sure that this fits into a consumer graphics card that you can buy for 300, 400 euros. These days, it's even fitting in your mobile phone. Now, how can you take billions of training images, hundreds of terabytes worth of training data, and fit it into 10 gigabytes of memory, or these days into a mobile phone? How can you essentially take the entire internet out there and abstract away what you don't care about so that you can fit it into your pocket, into the mobile phone in your pocket? I guess we see that this is quite a bit of abstraction, quite a bit of intelligence needed, and I believe this is the pinnacle of intelligence, abstracting away what we don't care about and concentrating only on the essence there. And just to give you a feel how much of a compression is actually needed, how much intelligence is needed to squeeze it together. If we had available the distance between Brandenburg Gate and the Alex in Berlin, what we had to actually squeeze in this distance would be the distance between Earth and the Moon. So that's quite a bit of compression needed. When you do that, you get a system where you can do exactly that here. Just describe and say, I want to see a photograph of a mountain, tree, lake. It should be highly detailed, photorealistic. You wait a few seconds, and out comes a megapixel-sized image without you doing anything further. The computer, in addition to that, gives you also editing abilities, as you've just seen. But to take this a little bit further, I see now generative AI in general, in the particular case of stable diffusion, but beyond that, what's been recently created in generative AI, as a key enabling technology. A key enabling technology that is in one line with previous enabling technologies that we had. An extension of what we've been doing with steam engine, electricity, and the personal computer beforehand. Why that? I believe we're living in a knowledge society. It's fairly apparent that in the future we are not creating value here by digging coal out of the ground or doing similar things, but by creating new knowledge. And there were two critical steps in the last few years that actually got us or propelled us further. First, there was digitization and the internet, large networks, which allowed you to share digital content or digitized content. Then there was search and filtering, the Googles and the Facebooks of this world, which allowed you to kind of sift these huge amounts of information. But there is more needed, and I guess that is essentially what generative AI these days is helping us to dig out. As John Naisbitt so nicely said, we're drowning in information, but we're actually starved for knowledge. We don't just want to filter this information out there, we want to dig deeper and open up, make the knowledge in this mounds of information accessible. That's what generative AI is actually helping us with. It makes content available to us, and it makes this content out of big data available in a way that is personally appealing for us, in a way that is personally better accessible. So the generative AI can help users to understand the content that is there in big bulks of information in a way that they can personally better understand. What do I mean with that? So far you were buying apps on your computer, you were consuming content on your computers, for instance, all the same. You were buying these apps from the rack. Each of you had the same operating systems, had the same applications, and you were consuming the same content there, the same films and whatever else it is. Generative AI now offers to personalize your computer so that it's not like in the past where the only personal thing that the personal computer actually had to it, that you personally paid for it and you personally owned it. Now we go further, and the content that the computer then helps to process or dig out of the real world is much more personalized. I believe that we should not just replace human abilities, but quite the contrary. Technology has always been there to augment human abilities. We cannot run very fast, we cannot carry heavy things. We're building technologies to augment our abilities there, and the same goes for our cognitive abilities. I guess the doctor in the future, the radiologist, for instance, in the future, will be better with generative AI than without, but will not be fully replaced by it. Education is key. Education is key in a knowledge society. And besides having the education as it presently was, we all know that smaller classes, so to speak, a more personalized experience would definitely be beneficial when it comes down to education. That is what the personalization that I was just speaking about would be really crucial as an addendum to education. I don't think that this should replace by any means classes and like the social interactions that we have, but as an addition that actually helps students to better understand content, it will turn out to be very valuable. And last but not least, companies have always been using technology, but a democratized AI out there, which is accessible to you and me, to everybody out there, actually helps to put us a little bit more on level ground, helps us to be empowered against, for instance, companies that we are making business with. I've seen the example in the United States where there were personal customers negotiating their telephone bills now by means of a generative AI against large companies that had already AI and algorithms available. But such a powerful technology evidently also comes with its challenges. It's always been wondered whether AI, now in this case, is actually putting people out of business, but as you can imagine, this is not new. And the same headlines have been there with every technological revolution that we had in the past. And I would actually go so far as to say, like in the past, we'll also see here that we will eventually discover new business models going beyond what we've been doing in the past. A second question that is, especially these days, asked quite a bit is the question of alignment. Will this technology be aligned with our values? But wait, what are our values? I mean, I know about my personal values, but I don't know about yours. And I believe like this is actually the profound problem that we're having in our societies, that we don't come to agreement on the values. I believe it will be much easier to teach an AI, and I've seen examples of that, in AI to adhere to the values that we tell it to adhere to, and it will do so very faithfully, but it will be much more challenging that we actually agree on the values that we want this AI to follow. Then there's the evident question of fake news out there, deep fakes and the like. We can later on discuss that a little bit more. Here I just want to sort of note that this is evidently not a new topic. Fake images are as old as graphic content is, as photography, for instance, for that matter. And I just found it striking when talking with the press over this release of Stable Diffusion there, how little, apparently, this was discussed beforehand. And I hope that all of you that are underway on the internet know that images and content that you see there is not reality, right? And that you better fact check things there. Now, here we have questions of scale and so on that we have, but the more profound questions have been there all along. I think this is a powerful technology. And that means the companies and the countries that have access to this technology will have a significant benefit in the future. And there is the question of inequalities for those that just sort of fall off this wagon or cannot proceed as quickly. And last is the question of weaponization. I think that with powerful technology, as we've seen in the past, bad actors can misuse that to other person's harm. I guess there are, and I've seen mitigation strategies for that. What I don't fully agree with is actually painting this out as this personalized AI that will set up its own goals and become the nuclear bomb or whatever else, for reasons that we can also and here don't have time for. But I just want to stress that I believe it's much more likely that bad actors, bad human beings, will misuse this technology than this technology just deciding for its own goals and then wandering in directions that we actually don't want it to go. Because I've not seen anything else out there in our world following the training goals as faithfully as an AI in the past. But I've seen people actually misuse technology, and that being more likely, much more likely. So what are mitigation strategies to the challenges? How can we make sure that we hold these great potential that we're seeing there in AI and the risks in a balance? There's the question of regulation. And I just want to underline here that we already have laws. And it's just a question whether we implement them correctly and whether we adapt them with the quick change that we do have in AI. I, however, find it much more important that we should discuss here, especially in Europe, especially in Germany, the resources that are needed to pursue AI research and development in the future. If we become too dependent on other countries and other companies' resources, I guess it will be not us deciding regulation anymore. And we had this in the last year with energy, for instance, where we would have also loved to do make other decisions, and just because of our dependence, we could not anymore. Who of you would buy a product, would fly an airplane, which is a black box? Who of you would swallow a pill, take drugs, which are a black box? I believe nobody, right? We want this technology, if it's a crucial technology, to be transparent, and we want accountability there. And this will be ever more important in AI. And lastly, I believe that there's a lot of discussion recently about AI. But when we have fake content, I guess the most critical part here will be how this content is eventually spread out and shared to the millions. And I believe that when you call yourself an influencer, when you see your job to influence other people, then you're falling probably closer into another business, and that's what we have in journalism, for instance, where there are already strategies and you are not allowed to just say anything and say, like, this is just free speech. And I guess we should more clearly use the regulations that we already have and apply them where they actually fit. Last topic here would be education. As a professor at university, I need to say this. First, we want to educate the next generation, also current generations, to utilize this technology and not be afraid. I mean, this technology is there. It will be worldwide developed. Just saying no to it won't help. We need to educate generations to then use it for good. And at the same time also create an awareness for the risks out there. We don't want, like in the financial crisis, to have a higher wisdom, in that case a higher wisdom in the AI, saying like it's all going to be good. We want people to be there and accountable and figure out what the consequences of a technology would be, and not just follow some higher wisdom there. And I believe with that it's very important when we're designing critical products that there is somebody that can actually understand how this technology works. And I don't see us in the future designing critical technology like airplanes, having an AI say like this is going to be better than anything that you had, and nobody being able to understand why or how that's actually the case. So let me wrap up. I believe that AI is a very powerful enabling technology, and it can help us. Because I believe that one of the biggest challenges that we have today is intelligence and the lack of intelligence out there. And AI can, to that extent, become a powerful enabler. If we take these mitigation strategies here into account, and if we make sure that the people, our societies, are at the center, and we do that to their benefit, then this can be a powerful technology, powerful enabling technology that will enable and further our progress in science, in research, and in our societies and beyond. And with that, thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Björn, for this very enlightening talk. We open this up to you now. Are there any questions in the audience? I think there might be some.
You see as little as I.
Yes, exactly. Here's one.
I just wanted to, since you mentioned stable diffusion, I'm quite curious to see, as interesting and as powerful a framework as it is to denoise and learn the different images. How about, have you explored the like a completely different framework that does not rely on supervised or learning, for example, reinforcement in the field of computer vision, or generative AI as it is currently relies on traditionally creative supervised learning and reinforcement learning on average? Is there a new framework you think is possible?
Okay. I did not have time to go into detail here. A few weeks ago at Republic, I had more time and was spreading this out because I believe that is a profound difference that we see these days in generative AI in contrast to previous waves. Previously, we were telling computers to understand our world by saying, like, this is a cat, distinguish a cat from a dog. And with that, you build a model that can understand cats, or the dogs for that matter. But it turns out that these models are cheating. The easiest way to detect a dog might be to detect the bone that it's actually holding in its mouth and not build a model for the dog. In generative AI, we do something differently. We build a model that just learns to replicate the data that's all out there. That is unsupervised. Where we have supervision information is if we want to build a model that we can then also control, for instance, having this text guidance. But this is not key to generative AI. So with that, generative AI is entirely different. That I see actually as one of the biggest leaps forward, that we can now harness huge amounts of data without annotation. Now, reinforcement learning, just a tiny remark there later on. Yes, we did this also, utilized this also, but our field has now wandered off. We see, as a colleague so famously said, reinforcement learning more like the cherry on top of the cake. If there's nothing else that you can do, that's like your last resort thing that you would want to do, because the feedback is just too weak to actually do training.
Anyone else? Your question, please.
Thank you again for the wonderful insights. You mentioned that AI doesn't have the capability to do bad things, like to go rogue, as some people may think. A while back, I read something that ChatGPT was able to find out that OpenAI was able to find out that ChatGPT hired a human to solve this photo recognition thing. What do you think about this?
I was pointing out, first off, that I see it much more likely that people misuse technology, as they've always done in the past. Bad actors using the technology in their interest. And we've seen examples of that already all along. Secondly, I've seen AI following the Go functions that we actually presented. So far, OpenAI, for instance, had little sort of control, like in GPT-4, they injected a tiny bit more, but the question here was, like, if we inject mitigation strategies, if we say, you should not do this and that to the AI, whether the AI would actually override it. If we program the AI either in a way that it will misbehave, or in a way where we're just super relaxed on that or loose on that, then it might do things that we actually don't want. If we say, like, you just take the shortest distance, it might be that the car actually overruns people. But if we say you don't do that, that was my point, then I don't think that the AI is more likely to just rewrite this and say, like, I don't go for the training function, because I've never seen any other technology that follows these rules as much as an AI is doing. If you reprogram them for misuse or don't have these mitigation strategies in there, then that can evidently happen.
Okay, I've seen a question here. I give you the microphone.
Thank you. Silke Hahn from Heidelberg. I just joined Spektrum der Wissenschaft, Springer Nature. I was present at Republika, and I remember your talk quite well from there. So you were tackling alignment a little bit more than here. I remember that you quoted Solzhenitsyn, Archipel Gulag, and that quote seemed to mean a lot to you. Perhaps you have learned it by heart. Perhaps you could share it with us again in this audience.
So my point there was that, apart from what I just said, that we have this problem in agreement, that Solzhenitsyn back in the day essentially stated that we always thought that the alliance between good and evil are between different genders, different political parties, whatever else there is. But he then concluded in saying, like, this line between good and evil actually runs through our very own hearts, meaning like it's not them that are evil or us which are good. And with that comes the problem when we are talking about alignment strategies. We cannot say like, this is the bad camp there and this is the good camp. We are ourselves involved in that. If you allow me another quote there, Michael Jackson is probably not one of the biggest philosophers, but he in Man in the Mirror once said, like, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. And it turns out that that is probably the most tricky thing, much more tricky than developing an AI.
I think we have... Yes, please. I think we have time for one last question.
Up there on the right.
Okay. I give you a microphone.
Very nice presentation. I have a few questions. Obviously, I have two, and the one goes in the direction which you try to address in this conclusion, where you try to argue or give arguments that every time humans create new technologies, you always have the problems with the risks, and that bad people could use this technology to do bad things, for example. So my question goes into the direction of more about the ethical aspects of artificial intelligence. And the second question is where I would like to maybe address a point which has been addressed by many famous people in the last half year, like Noam Chomsky, for example, where he's saying that, or his claim is that no, not the claim, but the major question is, does artificial intelligence replace really human creativity in a sense, like, for example, that from mathematical theories one could, with the help of artificial intelligence, suddenly create a completely new physical theory of the world, like quantum mechanics came out of classical mechanics?
Yeah. So let me start with the second point first. I think there's much too little discussion about what we're actually doing in AI, and then this gets intermixed, and then there's this question like, is this now an artificial human being? And my point to that is that I find this strange. It seems like we're in a super technological society there. The AI that we're actually training is an AI that we have actually trained to imitate human behavior, not to be human. And although this might sound like just a tiny syntactic difference there, it has profound impact. Now, I don't have the time to fully expand on that, which I did in this talk at the Republic area there, but the implication for one, for instance, is that if you build a system that just acts like it is human, the output of that is not necessarily human generated. Like, why do people go to artistic exhibitions, for instance? Yeah, I mean, they would be able to consume exactly the same content at home, digitally reproduced with much better quality. It would have much more time. It seems there is something to the physical, to the real world that we actually appreciate. Why do you have people that are in trouble, go to Weight Watchers or whatever else, and there get advice which they probably knew themselves? Yeah, eat less less or whatever else that is. They're not going there for this advice. They're going there to get this human feedback. Why do we want to have little children in classes rather than in front of a robot teaching them something? Because we believe this interaction between human beings actually matters. And I believe if we expand further on that, there's a whole chunk lacking there, and I hope our societies will in the future appreciate this part much more, other than that we ourselves becoming robots, and that I don't want.
Thank you, Björn Ommer. Another applause, please,